Good morning. This is Ron. It is Thursday, the 22nd of February, and welcome to Storytime. So today is the Storytime Extra, and it's going to be basically part two of what I covered a few days ago called the problems of talk radio. And the last time that I was discussing the problems of talk radio, the first problem I was saying that they had was that Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity et al. Spend too much time and too much emphasis on what goes on in Washington, D.C., and sometimes in state capitals, but what happens too much time and effort on politics and things political rather than spending time on cultural issues. So today, what I wanted to cover is one of the other problems for talk radio is that they really don't understand their socio-political opponents. They don't understand, even though they claim to. Rush Limbaugh likes to claim that he knows the left as well as he knows every, how does he put it, every inch of his glorious naked body is the way he puts it. So, and he doesn't when you listen to him. He really doesn't. He assumes that the left is interested in short-term goals and narrow political objectives, confining itself basically to the United States, and that if you listen to Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, that basically the left is only interested in ruining the country. So which is not true. The socialists are interested, and that's the other thing where they get this wrong, is they refer to the left in this country as liberals. Thomas Jefferson was a liberal. Okay, Nancy Pelosi's not a liberal. Chuck Schumer is not a liberal. You might, well, no, I was going to say Hillary Clinton might be considered as a liberal, but no, they're all socialists. Okay, you have two types of socialists. You have revolutionary socialists and you have evolutionary socialists. The revolutionary socialists want Socialist Paradise and expect it to happen via a worldwide socialist revolution. Evolutionary socialists say that a revolution is not necessary, that you can legislate your way to Socialist Paradise. And I would put Hillary Clinton in the evolutionary socialist camp, that she's one of the ones that believes you don't need to shed any blood or destroy property in order to get what you want. You can do it via the ballot box. So, but that's what the left has always wanted. Since 1850, the left has wanted and expected a worldwide revolution resulting in a form of paradise. With Marx, who started this whole thing, he said that it would be labor that would start the revolution, that capitalism would overextend itself and it would have no more markets to exploit, and then the collapse of capitalism would begin, labor would rise up and throw off its capitalist masters and usher in socialist paradise. And so in the 60s, a lot of people were asking themselves, a lot of people on the left, where's the revolution? Why haven't we had a revolution yet? Marx promised us a revolution, and I don't see it. And I don't see it coming anytime soon. Everybody seems to be fairly happy, at least in the United States. So where is it? That's when the left came up with something called PostMarxism. And they said that whereas it used to be that it was labor that would start the revolution, Postmarxism says it can be any oppressed class. That means it could be women, it could be oppressed racial minorities, Mexicans, blacks, and it could even be a religious minority. And in this particular case, Muslim or Islam. although I don't know that Islam would be considered a minority worldwide, it would definitely be considered a minority in the United States of America. And if you notice, the left in this country has a sort of a love-hate relationship with the terrorists, with the Taliban and Islamic Caliphate, etc. On the one hand, they hate the religious aspects of the Islamic movements, the Taliban and ISIS, but they like the revolutionary potential. Because when you get right down to it, all of these Islamic terrorist groups are looking for pretty much the same thing that the socialists are looking for: worldwide revolution resulting in worldwide paradise. Difference, of course, being is that the Muslims want an Islamic, and were promised an Islamic paradise. Everybody would be worshiping Allah. And the socialists, of course, are looking for a secular paradise. But the left likes the fact that the terrorists are revolutionary minded, that they're agitating for change. They are trying to overturn the status quo wherever and whenever they can. And the left, I think, believes that it can encourage ISIS and groups like ISIS to continue their revolutionary ways, and that when the worldwide revolution begins, that the socialists will have the wherewithal and be perfectly positioned to steer that revolution to its logical, secular conclusion, i.e., socialist paradise. So again, the left doesn't like the religious aspects of it, but they love the revolutionary potential of these terrorist organizations. That's part of the reason why the left bristles every time somebody refers to terrorist organizations as Islamo-fascists. The left gets really upset about that because they don't want the revolution to be tainted. They want it to come off pretty much the way they think it's going to be planned or destined to come off. So that's the first thing that they don't understand. Again, the right-wing radio that they don't understand about their opponents is that their objectives are worldwide. It's not so much that they hate the United States, and you hear that a lot from right-wing radio. Oh, the left hates the country. The left just considers the United States and all countries as an anachronism, that they are passé, and that all nation states have to go in favor of a worldwide socialist paradise. Okay, in socialist paradise, there aren't going to be any countries. There aren't going to be any borders. It's just going to be one big happy family. Everybody's going to trade amongst themselves. There's not going to be any owners of the means of production and things of that nature. Everybody will act as equals throughout the world. No borders, no nations, no anthems, nothing, and no armies, of course. So the left, in so doing, in pursuing their revolution and their socialist paradise, are always looking to create a movement. And they're not going to try to create their movement with intellectual efforts. They're not going to try to convince people to become a socialist. They're not going to try to convince people with logic and reasoning that socialism is a better way. And they're not going to do it in part because of some underlying philosophical issues. The underlying metaphysics and epistemology of the left is, well, as far as metaphysics are concerned, the left feels that all realities are man-made realities. What they try to do is shape philosophy in order to bypass logic and reasoning. And what they ultimately do and use is psychology. They want to use psychology and psychologistic tactics and techniques. And what they're looking to do because you can have a revolution, you can force people to do what you want them to do. You can get guns and you can round people up and you can force them to live in any whatever way that they will submit to. Uh, you can have them live as economic equals or unequals or whatever at the point of a gun. The problem with doing it with physical force is that the people, a good many of those people, are going to be potentially counter revolutionary and looking for an opportunity, constantly looking for an opportunity to upset the revolution and resume, put things back to the way they were. And that's why the excuse for why the Soviet Union failed, Eastern Bloc countries failed, and that communism and socialism worldwide has generally been a failure. So what they realize is that if we can get into people's psyche, we can play with their mind and get them to want socialism, get them to identify with socialism and socialist tactics, techniques, socialist ideals. That's the word I'm looking for. To get them to identify with socialist ideals, then they're going to usher these people will usher it in by themselves. And once you get to Socialist Paradise, there's not going to be any blowback. There's not going to be anybody that's going to be trying to upset the apple cart, so to speak. So, and so when the Rush Limbaugh is talking, for instance, to somebody that calls up and says, "Hi, I'm a lefty or a Democrat," he doesn't realize that the person that's talking to him is using psychologistic techniques and trying to psych him out in various ways, shapes, and forms. He takes it straight. He thinks that they're trying to be intellectual and that they're trying to be logical and reasonable. And so he looks at the conversation from that standpoint and he misses the underlying psychological threat. The most common tactic for the left, and what is what makes the left, is making the presumption for change. As I said in a previous episode, that the difference between conservatives and socialists is where you stand on change, not where you stand on issues, but where you stand on change. If you make the presumption for the status quo, you say that things are fine basically the way they are, unless and until you're shown obvious evidence that things need to change. For instance, slavery is a prima facie case for change. Jim Crow is a prima facie case for change. What you see with school shootings is a prima facie case for change. Exactly what kind of change we need there is another issue, but there's no doubt that there's a need for change in that particular instance. So what they will do, again, the left will do, is the way they phrase it is always, why not? Well, why not this? Why not that? Classic example was John McEnroe, who is a announcer, and he is a tennis announcer and former tennis player. And he was he's a play-by-play and analyst, and he was analyzing a woman's tennis game, and I think he was analyzing and being asked where various women in professional tennis rank and should rank. And there was a woman there that asked, well, why not rank all of the tennis players in one ranking system? Why shouldn't we get rid of having two separate systems? A woman's system and a men's system. And John McEnroe didn't know what to do with that. He flumbled and splumbled because he didn't know what this woman was doing, that this woman was making the presumption for change. And whenever you make the presumption for change, it's very powerful. And these always, the psychologistic techniques are always powerful based on the if. And the if is if your opponent doesn't know what you're doing. If your opponent is ignorant of your tactics and your techniques, then it's a very powerful tool. In this particular case, John McEnroe didn't know what she was doing. He treated it as though it was a legitimate question instead of realizing that he was being tricked, or, as I like to say, punked. And he was being tricked and boxed into a corner. He's being put in the position of having to prove a negative, why something shouldn't change. Okay, that's the problem with making the presumption for change, is that it puts your opponents in a position where they have to um, prove why something shouldn't happen, which is impossible. It is not possible. So if you put it from the other way and you say, make the presumption for the status quo, and you say, and what he should have said, told her was, well, why not change things, is to say, because things are fine the way they are. And then you're putting it back on her to come back and say, no, it's not, and this is the evidence I have that it isn't. And if she has good evidence and proof that this system needs to change, then you say, okay, I was wrong, you're right, it needs to change. Then, and only then, you can talk about how best to change it. How should the system change at that particular point? So, and that's what I hear with Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and others, time after time after time. People call them up and say, why not this? Why not that? Why shouldn't we X? Why shouldn't the Republicans blah, blah, blah? And and Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh fall for it every time. They end up twisting themselves into knots trying to come up with a reasonable, rational answer to a question that has no reasonable or rational answer. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. And tomorrow I'm going to be back at with Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy Who Needs It, the next chapter, chapter 3. And as a matter of fact, it would be, let me see, let me think. No, it should be, I may end up doing another extra, because on the weekend I usually like to do Saturday and Sunday, do reading from do my reading back to back Saturday and Sunday, and then have Monday, Wednesday, and Friday have the Storytime Extra. So I guess this being Thursday, I probably should have, but anyways. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. Let's put it that way. And Saturday and Sunday, I'll definitely be reading from more chapters from Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy Who Needs It. But until tomorrow, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.